The bridge of the USS Endeavour hummed with the quiet efficiency of a ship deep in space. Captain Jake Morrison stood near the center viewport, watching the stars drift past as his vessel moved through the darkness between worlds. 3 months into their exploration mission, the crew had mapped 17 new systems and found nothing more exciting than gas clouds and dead rocks. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker sat at her communications station, running routine scans of local space frequencies. The tall blonde woman had served under Morrison for 2 years and knew the signs when he was getting restless. Long missions like this one tested everyone's patience, but the captain always seemed to take it hardest when they found empty systems instead of new life. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," Parker said, her fingers dancing across her control panel. The bridge grew quiet as the other officers turned their attention to her station. "It's very faint, but there's definitely an artificial signal coming from the Kepler 442 system." Morrison moved to her station and leaned over her shoulder to study the display. The signal appeared as a weak pulse on the frequency analyzer, barely distinguishable from background radiation. "How far out is that system?" "About 6 light years from our current position, sir," replied Navigator Tony Webb from his station. The young man had graduated from the academy just 2 years ago, but his skill with stellar cartography had earned him a place on Morrison's crew. "If we adjust course now, we could reach the system in 18 hours, Morrison nodded slowly. First contact protocols required investigation of any artificial signals, but something about this one felt different. The pattern was too regular to be natural, but too weak to be a normal communication attempt. "Can you clean up the signal? Get me something we can actually understand?" Parker worked at her station for several minutes, running the signal through various filters and enhancement programs. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge from the static. "So this is definitely a distress signal. The mathematical progression is universal, but there's something else embedded in it." She routed the clean signal to the main speakers and the bridge, filled with a haunting sound that made everyone stop what they were doing. It was clearly a voice, alien but unmistakably desperate. The tone conveyed fear and hopelessness in a way that transcended language barriers. "Run it through the universal translator," Morrison ordered. He had heard distress calls before, but never one that carried such raw emotion. Whatever was happening in the Kepler 442 system, it was bad. The translator worked for several minutes, building a language framework from the repeated phrases in the message. Finally, words began to appear on the main screen as the alien voice continued its desperate plea. "Help us, please, anyone who can hear this message. My name is Keeper Thalon, of the Zelani people. Our world is under attack. They came from the void 3 cycles ago and began destroying our cities. We are not warriors. We have no weapons to fight them. They take our people and we never see them again. Our children cry in the caves where we hide. If there are others among the stars who believe in mercy, please help us. We are dying." The bridge fell completely silent as the message repeated. Morrison felt a cold weight settle in his stomach as he processed what they had just heard. Somewhere in the Kepler 442 system, an entire species was being slaughtered while calling desperately for help. "Sir, should I plot a course?" Webb asked. Quietly, the young navigator's face had gone pale as he listened to the alien's plea. Morrison looked around at his crew. He saw the same expression on every face that he felt in his own heart. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers, but they were also human beings who had just listened to someone begging for help. "Do it, maximum speed," as the Endeavour changed course toward the distant system. Parker continued working to establish better communication with the source of the signal. After an hour of careful adjustment, she managed to open a 2-way channel. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel USS Endeavour," he said into the communication system. "We received your distress signal and are coming to help. Can you hear us?" The response came after a long delay, filled with static and interference. When the alien voice came through the speakers, it carried a note of desperate hope that made Morrison's chest tighten. "Humans? We do not know this word, but if you can travel between the stars, you are more than we dared hope for. I am Keeper Thalon. I speak for what remains of my people. The Vorthak Empire has brought death to our world. They take our people for their ships and their experiments. We have tried to hide, but they hunt us with machines that see through stone and earth. Morrison exchanged glances with his first officer, Commander Dan Walsh. The older man had served in the military before joining the exploration corps, and his expression was grim. Captain, we're one ship against an unknown enemy force. We should contact Fleet Command. How long until we reach the system? Morrison asked Webb. 17 hours at current speed, sir. Morrison nodded and activated the long-range communication array. It would take time for a message to reach human space, and even longer for help to arrive. Lisa, compose a message to Admiral Sullivan at Fleet Command. Tell her we have a first contact situation involving an ongoing genocide. Request immediate military support at the Kepler 442 system. As Parker worked on the message, Morrison opened the channel to Thalon again. Keeper Thalon, we are sending for help, but it will take time to arrive. Can you tell us more about these Vorthak? How many ships do they have? What kind of weapons? The alien's response painted a picture that made Morrison's blood run cold. The Vorthak had arrived with dozens of ships and began systematically destroying every Zalani settlement they could find. They showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. When they captured Zalani, those people were never seen again. They are not like you, Thalon said, his translated voice heavy with despair. They do not speak to us as people. To them, we are things to be used. They strip our world of its metals and take our people for purposes we do not understand. We have tried to fight, but we are farmers and teachers. We know nothing of war. Morrison felt anger building in his chest as he listened to the alien's description. Throughout human history, his species had seen the results of such systematic cruelty, and it always ended the same way. Someone had to stand up and fight, or entire peoples disappeared forever. Keeper Thalon, I want you to listen to me carefully, Morrison said. My people know about war. We know about bullies who prey on the innocent. We are coming, and we will not let the Vorthak destroy your people. Can you hold out for 17 more hours? The response took a long time to come, and when it did, Morrison could hear the tears in the alien's voice. You would do this for people you have never met? Captain Morrison, if your people truly come to help us, the Zalani will remember this. Kindness until the last star dies. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. He saw determination there, and something else that made him proud to be human. They were afraid, but they were not going to turn away from people who needed help. Keeper Thalon, we are humans, Morrison said firmly. We do not abandon people who need help. Hold on just a little longer. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office at Human Defense Force headquarters, reviewing supply reports when the priority communication alert sounded. The red light on her desk meant emergency contact from deep space, and in her 15 years of military service, she had learned that such messages never brought good news. She activated the secure channel, and Captain Morrison's face appeared on her screen. The transmission quality was poor due to the vast distance, but she could see the tension in his expression clearly enough. Admiral, we have intercepted an alien distress signal from the Kepler 442 system. A species called the Zalani is under attack by something called the Vorthak Empire. The situation appears to be genocide. Sullivan leaned forward in her chair as Morrison continued his report. She had known Jake Morrison for 8 years, first as a promising young officer and later as one of her most trusted exploration captains. He was not given to exaggeration or panic, which made his next words all the more disturbing. The Zalani described themselves as a peaceful species with no military capability. The Vorthak have been systematically destroying their settlements and taking prisoners for unknown purposes. Admiral, these people are calling for help, and we are the only ones close enough to respond. The transmission included the translated recordings of Keeper Thalon's desperate pleas for help. Sullivan listened to the alien voice with growing anger. The tone of absolute despair and the description of systematic slaughter reminded her of the worst chapters in human history. She had joined the military specifically to prevent such horrors from happening to her own people. "Sir, I am requesting immediate fleet support," Morrison continued. "The Endeavor is one ship against an unknown enemy force. We need a full battle. Group if we are going to save these people." Sullivan ended the transmission and immediately called for her senior staff. Within minutes, her ready room filled with the commanders who ran the day-to-day operations of humanity's deep space forces. General Robert Pike commanded the Marine Forces, while Admiral Lucy Clark oversaw fleet logistics. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," Sullivan began, playing Morrison's message for her staff. She watched their faces as they listened to the Zilani's desperate calls for help. These were experienced military officers who had seen combat in the outer colonies, but the raw emotion in the alien voice affected them visibly. General Pike spoke first. "Admiral, the Kepler 442 system is outside our normal patrol zone. We have no strategic interest there, and we know nothing about either the Zilani or these Vorthak. Committing major fleet assets based on one transmission could be seen as reckless." Admiral Clark nodded in agreement. "The logistics alone are challenging. We would need to deploy at least a dozen ships to make a meaningful difference, and the round trip would take over a week. That ties up significant resources for an unknown situation." Sullivan understood their concerns. Military commanders had to think strategically about resource allocation and mission priorities. However, she also understood something else that made her decision easier than they expected. "Play the transmission again," she ordered her aide. As Keeper Thalen's voice filled the room once more, describing how the Vorthak hunted Zilani children through caves, Sullivan watched her officers' faces. She saw the moment when military calculation gave way to human decency. "Admiral Clark, how quickly can we deploy the Third Fleet to Kepler 442? Sullivan asked quietly. Clark consulted her tablet for several moments before responding. "If we leave immediately, we can have 12 ships there in 72 hours. That would include the USS Vengeance, USS Liberty, USS Defiant, and 9 support vessels." "Do it," Sullivan said firmly. "Full combat configuration. I want every ship armed for serious fighting and ready for anything we might find there." General Pike cleared his throat. "Admiral, with respect, we should consider the political implications. If we intervene in an alien conflict, we could be starting humanity's first interstellar war." Sullivan stood and walked to the large viewport that showed Earth hanging in space below the orbital station. She thought about Morrison's words and the desperation in the Zilani voice. She thought about her own daughter, safe at home, and imagined her hiding in caves while monsters hunted her. "General, if we ignore this situation, we become complicit in genocide. When word gets out that humanity received a distress call and chose to do nothing, what does that say about who we are as a species?" She turned back to face her staff. "I would rather risk starting a war than let innocent people die when we could have helped them." Admiral Clark began issuing orders to her staff, calling up ship commanders and coordinating the rapid deployment. The Third Fleet represented some of humanity's most advanced warships, and getting them ready for immediate departure required careful coordination. Captain Alex Johnson of the USS Liberty was the first to respond to the call-up. The veteran officer had commanded the heavy cruiser for 3 years and fought in several engagements against pirates in the outer systems. When Sullivan explained the situation, his response was immediate and forceful. "Admiral, the Liberty is ready to deploy immediately. My crew will not stand by while innocent people are slaughtered." Captain Maria Rodriguez of the USS Defiant echoed Johnson's sentiment. The destroyer captain was known for her aggressive tactics and complete loyalty to her crew. "Ma'am, if someone is hunting civilians, they need to be stopped. The Defiant is ready for whatever we find out there." As the fleet prepared for departure, Sullivan received updated intelligence from the Endeavor. Captain Morrison had moved closer to the Kepler 442 system and was conducting passive scans of the area. His reports painted an increasingly disturbing picture of the situation. The Vorthak fleet consisted of at least 30 ships of unknown design and capability. They had established orbital facilities around the Zilani homeworld and were conducting large-scale mining operations on the planet's surface. Most disturbing were the energy signatures that suggested massive industrial facilities had been constructed in just a few months. Commander Ben Taylor, the fleet's senior intelligence officer, briefed Admiral Sullivan as the ships prepared to depart. The quiet, analytical man had spent years studying alien technology and first contact protocols. But this situation was unlike anything in the textbooks. Admiral, based on Captain Morrison's scans, the Vorthak appear to have a significant technological advantage over the Zilani. They have also demonstrated a complete disregard for civilian casualties. If they are willing to commit genocide against one species, they will likely view humanity as another obstacle to be removed. Sullivan nodded grimly as she reviewed the tactical reports. Humanity would be entering this conflict with limited intelligence about enemy capabilities, but she had confidence in her crews and their equipment. More importantly, she knew that fighting for the right reasons often mattered more than technological advantages. The USS Vengeance led the fleet out of Earth orbit, exactly 68 hours after Morrison's initial message. 12 human warships accelerated toward the Kepler 442 system at maximum speed, carrying nearly 4,000 crew members who had volunteered for a mission that could change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Sullivan sent a final message to Captain Morrison. "Jake, help is on the way. Do what you can to protect the Zilani until we arrive. Show these Vorthak what happens when they threaten innocent people." Admiral Sullivan settled into her command chair aboard the Vengeance as Earth disappeared behind them. In 72 hours, humanity would announce its presence to the galaxy in a way that would be remembered for generations. She only hoped they would arrive in time to save the people who had called for help. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with the precision that came from years of training and discipline. Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching as the tactical display populated with contacts throughout the system. What she saw made her jaw clench with barely controlled anger. 37 Vorthak ships hung in orbit around the Zilani homeworld like vultures around a dying animal. Massive industrial platforms had been constructed in the space of just a few months, and the planet's surface showed the ugly scars of strip mining operations. Energy readings indicated that entire cities had been reduced to smoking craters. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from his position near the system's outer planets. "Admiral, the situation is worse than we initially reported. The Vorthak have established what appear to be prison facilities on the planet's largest moon. We are detecting thousands of life signs in conditions that can only be described as concentration camps." Sullivan felt her hands ball into fists as she processed this information. Through her years of military service, she had studied the darkest chapters of human history to ensure such horrors would never happen to her own species. Now she was witnessing those same atrocities being committed against innocent aliens who had done nothing but call for help. "Commander Taylor, what can you tell me about their fleet composition?" she asked her intelligence officer. Ben Taylor worked at his station for several minutes, analyzing the sensor data streaming in from the human ships. "Admiral, the Vorthak vessels appear to be built for conquest rather than exploration. Heavy armor, massive weapon signatures, and what look like troop transport capabilities. They are definitely a military empire designed for subjugating other species." Sullivan nodded grimly and ordered the fleet to take up defensive positions around the Zilani moon where the survivors were being held. The human ships moved with practiced efficiency, creating overlapping fields of fire that would protect the prisoners while allowing for rapid response to any Vorthak aggression. "Admiral, I am detecting movement in the Vorthak fleet," reported Lieutenant Nancy Cole from the sensor station. "3 ships are breaking orbit and moving to intercept us." On the main screen, Sullivan could see the alien vessels approaching. They were ugly things, all angles and aggressive lines that spoke of a culture built around warfare and domination. Each ship was roughly the same size as a human cruiser, but their design philosophy was clearly different. "Open a channel to the lead Vorthak vessel," Sullivan ordered. "Let us see if these creatures understand reason before we show them the alternative." The communication system crackled to life, and an alien voice filled the bridge. The universal translator worked quickly to convert the harsh, guttural language into something the humans could understand. What came through was arrogance mixed with contempt. "I am High Admiral Krax of the Vorthak Empire. You will identify yourselves and explain your presence in claimed Imperial territory before we destroy you for trespassing." Sullivan stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "I am Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Defense Force. We are here in response to a distress call from the Zelani people. We demand that you immediately cease all hostile actions against them and withdraw from this system." The response was immediate laughter, a sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone on the bridge. High Admiral Krax's translated voice dripped with amusement and disdain. "Humans? Another primitive species that thinks it can challenge the might of the Empire. We have conquered 43 worlds and enslaved dozens of species. The Zelani are prey animals, and soon you will join them in our labor camps." Sullivan felt her temper flare, but years of military discipline kept her voice level. "High Admiral Krax, you have one opportunity to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Withdraw your forces and release the Zelani prisoners, or we will remove you from this system by force." The alien's response revealed exactly what humanity was dealing with. "You protect prey animals, which proves your species is weak. We will harvest the remaining Zelani after we demonstrate your fragility. Perhaps some of you will survive to serve the Empire." The communication channel went dead, and Admiral Sullivan turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, prepare for combat. It appears diplomacy has failed." On the tactical display, the 3 approaching Vorthak ships suddenly accelerated toward a human formation. Their intent was clear. They planned to destroy one human vessel as a demonstration of their power and superiority. Captain Rodriguez aboard the USS Defiant was their chosen target. The alien ships moved in a coordinated attack pattern that spoke of extensive combat experience. Their weapons lit up space as they fired what appeared to be some form of plasma cannon at the human destroyer. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. The Defiant's shields absorbed the alien weapons fire with ease, while Captain Rodriguez maneuvered her ship with an agility that clearly caught the Vorthak off guard. The destroyer's return fire was devastatingly accurate. Human kinetic weapons, designed to punch through the heaviest armor, tore into the lead Vorthak ship like it was made of paper. The alien vessel's shields collapsed after just 3 hits, and the 4th shot penetrated their hull and detonated their main reactor. The explosion lit up space like a small star. The 2nd Vorthak ship attempted to flee, but Captain Rodriguez was not finished with them. The Defiant's missiles locked onto the retreating vessel and struck it amidships. The alien ship broke apart. In a series of secondary explosions that scattered debris across several thousand kilometers of space, the 3rd Vorthak vessel managed to escape back toward their main fleet, but not before the human sensors recorded detailed scans of their technology and capabilities. What they found was both encouraging and disturbing. Commander Taylor's analysis was swift and thorough. "Admiral, the Vorthak ships are heavily armed but poorly designed for actual combat. Their shields are powerful but inflexible, and their armor is thick but brittle. However, their numerical advantage is significant." Sullivan nodded as she watched the surviving Vorthak ship report back to High Admiral Krax. The alien commander would now know that humanity was not the easy target he had expected, but he would also be planning his response accordingly. "Captain Johnson, how did the Liberty perform during that engagement?" Sullivan asked over the communication system. Alex Johnson's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Admiral, our weapon systems performed better than expected. The alien's technology appears to be designed for intimidating primitives rather than fighting a real military force." Sullivan allowed herself a moment of hope. Humanity had won the first engagement, but she knew the real battle was just beginning. High Admiral Krax would not underestimate them again, and 34 Vorthak ships represented a formidable force regardless of their individual limitations. All ships maintain defensive positions around the Zalani moon, she ordered. Prepare for a major engagement? Krax knows we are not going to leave, and he cannot afford to lose face by backing down. As if summoned by her words, the entire Vorthak fleet began moving toward the human position. 34 alien warships accelerated through space in a formation designed to overwhelm any opposition through sheer numbers and firepower. Admiral Sullivan looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She saw determination there, mixed with the natural fear that came before any battle. These men and women had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to help people they had never met, and now they were about to face the consequences of that. Choice. All hands, this is Admiral Sullivan, she announced over the ship-wide communication system. In a few minutes, we are going to show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens innocent people. Make humanity proud. The space around the Zalani moon erupted into chaos as 34 Vorthak warships opened fire on the human fleet. Plasma beams and missile salvos lit up the darkness while Admiral Sullivan's 12 ships responded with devastating precision. What the Vorthak expected to be a quick demonstration of overwhelming force quickly turned into something entirely different. Captain Alex Johnson aboard the USS Liberty found himself at the center of the alien assault as 3 Vorthak cruisers concentrated their fire on his ship. The heavy impacts shook the vessel and sent sparks flying across the bridge, but the Liberty's advanced shielding systems held firm against the barrage. Return fire, all batteries, Johnson ordered calmly. His crew had trained for this moment for years, and their response was immediate and professional. The Liberty's main guns swiveled toward the nearest Vorthak ship and fired a coordinated salvo that punched through the alien vessel's shields. Like they were tissue paper, the Vorthak ship tried to maneuver away from the devastating human weapons, but Johnson had anticipated the move. Target their engines, he commanded. Let us see how well they fight when they cannot run away. The second volley from the Liberty crippled the alien cruiser's propulsion system, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. The third volley finished the job, reducing the Vorthak ship to expanding debris and superheated gas across the battlefield. Similar scenes played out as human tactical superiority became evident. The Vorthak fought like a mob, each ship acting independently without coordination or mutual support. The humans fought like a pack of wolves, each vessel covering its neighbors while focusing fire on isolated targets. Captain Maria Rodriguez in the USS Defiant used her ship's superior maneuverability to devastating effect. She led 4 Vorthak ships on a chase through the asteroid field surrounding the Zalani moon, using the rocky debris as cover while her gunners picked off the pursuing aliens one by one. These creatures have no imagination, Rodriguez muttered, as another Vorthak ship fell into her trap. They follow the same attack patterns over and over, even when those patterns get them killed. Admiral Sullivan watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Vengeance while coordinating the fleet's movements. The numerical advantage that should have overwhelmed her forces was meaningless when the enemy could not adapt to changing circumstances or coordinate their attacks effectively. Commander Taylor, what is your assessment of their combat doctrine? She asked her intelligence officer. Ben Taylor studied the tactical display, where human ships were systematically dismantling the larger Vorthak force. Admiral, they appear to fight the way they conquer. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming numbers rather than skill or tactics. Against primitives, it probably works perfectly. Against us, it is getting them slaughtered. As if to emphasize Taylor's point, High Admiral Krax's flagship began broadcasting on all frequencies. The alien commander's voice carried frustration and growing desperation as he watched his fleet being destroyed by what he had assumed were inferior opponents. All ships, concentrate fire on the human flagship, Krax ordered. Destroy their command vessel and the rest will surrender. 8 Vorthak ships turned toward the Vengeance and opened fire simultaneously. The combined barrage was impressive, filling space with energy beams and explosive projectiles. However, Admiral Sullivan had anticipated exactly this response from an enemy commander who was used to easy victories against helpless opponents. "All ships, execute Formation Delta," she commanded. The human fleet had practiced this maneuver countless times, and their response was immediate and coordinated. The ships moved into a defensive shell around the Vengeance while maintaining their offensive capabilities. The concentrated Vorthok attack struck the combined shields of 4 human vessels instead of overwhelming a single target. The energy dispersed harmlessly while the return fire from the human formation destroyed 3 alien ships in as many minutes. Captain Morrison, watching the battle from his position aboard the Endeavour, provided crucial intelligence about Vorthok ship movements. His sensors could track the entire battlefield without being engaged in active combat, giving Admiral Sullivan a tactical advantage that the aliens could not match. "Admiral, I am detecting energy signatures from the Vorthok ships that suggest they are preparing some kind of boarding action," Morrison reported. "Multiple vessels are launching what appear to be assault craft." Sullivan smiled grimly as she processed this information. The Vorthok were about to make their biggest mistake yet. "All ships, prepare to receive boarders. Show these creatures what happens when they try to fight humans on our own ground." The first wave of Vorthok assault craft struck the USS Liberty, cutting through the hull with plasma torches and deploying armored troops into the human ship's corridors. The aliens were confident in their physical superiority and expected to overwhelm the human crew through brute force and intimidation. What they found instead was Captain Johnson and his Marines waiting for them in full combat armor. The Vorthok shock troops were large and strong, but they had never faced opponents who fought back with such ferocity and skill. The boarding action turned into a massacre that lasted less than 20 minutes. "Admiral, boarding repelled," Johnson reported, with grim satisfaction. "The aliens are strong, but they fight like amateurs. No tactics, no coordination, just brute force. Against trained human Marines, they do not stand a chance." Similar reports came in from the other ships that had been boarded. The Vorthok troops, accustomed to terrorizing helpless civilians, found themselves completely outmatched by humans, who had evolved as persistence predators on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Commander Taylor's analysis of the captured Vorthok equipment revealed disturbing information about their empire's methods. "Admiral, these weapons are designed for intimidation rather than effectiveness. The armor is impressive looking but poorly designed for actual combat. Everything about their military suggests they are used to fighting opponents who cannot fight back." As the battle continued, the Vorthok fleet began to disintegrate under the relentless human assault. Ships that tried to flee were hunted down by Captain Rodriguez and her destroyers. Ships that stood and fought were systematically destroyed by the superior firepower and tactics of Admiral Sullivan's cruisers. High Admiral Crax found himself commanding a rapidly shrinking force against enemies who seemed to anticipate his every move. The humans fought with a coordination and adaptability that his species had never encountered before. Worse, they showed no sign of being intimidated by Vorthok's superiority in numbers or size. "How are these primitives defeating us?" Crax demanded of his subordinates. "They should be cowering before the might of the Empire, not destroying our ships like they are nothing." His tactical officer, reviewing the sensor data from the engagement, provided an answer that chilled the alien commander to his core. "Hi, Admiral, the humans are not primitives. Their technology is equal or superior to ours in every category. Their tactics are unlike anything in our databases. They fight like they have been preparing for this war their entire lives." The battle reached its climax when Admiral Sullivan ordered a coordinated assault on the remaining Vorthok ships. Every human vessel focused their fire on High Admiral Crax's flagship, while smaller ships hunted down the surviving alien cruisers. The Vorthok flagship shields collapsed under the concentrated barrage, and Crax realized with growing horror that his empire had encountered something it was not prepared to face. These humans were not another primitive species to be enslaved. They were apex predators from a death world, and they had decided that the Vorthok Empire needed to be stopped. All remaining ships, retreat to the outer system, Krax ordered in desperation. We must regroup and request reinforcements from the home fleet. Admiral Sullivan watched the surviving Vortex ships flee toward the edge of the system. 23. Alien vessels had been destroyed, with the remainder scattered and demoralized. The human fleet had taken damage but suffered no ship losses. All ships maintain pursuit, she commanded. We are not finished with these butchers yet. The human landing parties that descended to the Zilani homeworld found horrors that would haunt their dreams for years to come. Captain Morrison led the first team down to what had once been the planet's capital city, now reduced to smoking ruins and massive excavation sites. What they discovered in the underground facilities made even veteran soldiers stop and stare in shocked silence. Commander, Ben Taylor's team found the research laboratories first. Row after row of examination tables bore the evidence of medical experiments conducted on living Zilani. The aliens had been studying their prisoners like laboratory animals, testing their limits and recording their responses to various stimuli. The clinical documentation was thorough and completely without mercy. Admiral, you need to see this. Taylor's voice came over the communication system, tight with barely controlled rage. The Vorthik have been conducting biological experiments on Zilani children. They have detailed records of everything they did to these people. Admiral Sullivan felt her hands shake as she reviewed the translated documents that Taylor transmitted to the fleet. The Vorthak had not simply conquered the Zilani for their resources or territory. They had been studying them to understand how to break their spirit completely, how to turn a peaceful species into perfect slaves who would never resist or fight back. Captain Alex Johnson's team found the mass graves outside the former cities. Thousands of Zilani had been executed when they were no longer useful for labor or experimentation. The bodies had been dumped in huge pits and covered with only a thin layer of soil. Some of the graves were still fresh. These are not warriors, Johnson reported grimly. These are farmers, teachers, artists. The Vorthak have been murdering entire families for the crime of existing on a world they wanted to steal. As the human teams continued their grim work of documenting Vorthik atrocities, Admiral Sullivan made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations. She opened a communication channel to every ship in her fleet and spoke words that would define humanity's place among the stars. All hands, this is Admiral Sullivan. We came here to rescue innocent people from genocide. What we have found is something far worse. The Vorthik Empire is not just conquering other species. They are perfecting the science of breaking entire civilizations and turning them into slaves. This cannot be allowed to continue. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing with quiet determination. We are not just going to rescue the Zilani. We are going to make sure the Vorthik Empire never does this to anyone else again. No mercy for monsters. The remaining Vorthak ships had retreated to the outer edge of the system, where High Admiral Krax was desperately trying to contact his home fleet for reinforcements. His messages painted an increasingly desperate picture of the situation as he tried to explain how 12 human ships had destroyed over half of his force. The humans are not what they appear to be, Krax reported to his superiors. They fight like demons and show no fear of death. Their technology is more advanced than our intelligence suggested. I require immediate reinforcement of at least 60 ships to contain this threat. Admiral Sullivan had no intention of waiting for Vorthik reinforcements to arrive. She ordered Captain Rodriguez to take half the remaining human fleet and begin hunting down every alien ship in the system. The USS Defiant and 5 other vessels began a systematic search that would leave no hiding place unexplored. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison coordinated the liberation of the prison camps on the Zilani moon. Human Marines stormed the facilities with precision and overwhelming force, finding over 30,000 Zilani survivors crammed into conditions designed to break their will to live. Keeper Thalon was among the first prisoners freed, and his reunion with Captain Morrison was emotional for everyone present. The elderly Zilani had been beaten and starved, but his spirit remained unbroken despite months of Vorthok cruelty. Captain Morrison, your people have done something we thought impossible, Thalen said through the translator, tears streaming down his alien features. You came to help strangers and you fought monsters to save us. How can the Zilani ever repay such kindness? Morrison helped the frail alien to his feet and looked around at the thousands of other survivors being freed by his Marines. Keeper Thalen, you do not owe us anything. This is what decent people do when they see others in trouble. We could not call ourselves human if we had turned away. As the rescue operations continued, Captain Rodriguez's hunting parties began to corner the surviving Vorthak ships one by one. The aliens had scattered throughout the system in hopes of avoiding the human fleet, but they had underestimated the persistence and skill of their pursuers. Each engagement followed the same pattern. The Vorthak would try to fight, discover they were hopelessly outmatched, and then attempt to surrender. However, Admiral Sullivan's orders had been clear. The crews could surrender and face trial for war crimes, but the ships themselves would be destroyed to prevent them from returning to terrorize other worlds. Hi. Admiral Krax watched helplessly as his fleet was systematically eliminated. Ship after ship fell to human weapons until only his flagship remained. When Captain Johnson's USS Liberty finally cornered the alien command vessel, Krax found himself facing a choice he had never expected to make. Human vessel, this is High. Admiral Krax, the alien commander transmitted. I request terms for surrender. The Vorthak Empire will negotiate for the return of our personnel and equipment. Captain Johnson's response was immediate and final. Hi, Admiral Krax, you are responsible for the genocide of innocent people. Your empire's negotiating days are over. Surrender your ship and prepare to face justice for your crimes. The final battle of the Kepler 442 system lasted only minutes. The Vorthak flagship's weapons were no match for the Liberty's superior firepower, and Krax's ship was disabled and boarded before the alien commander could destroy his vessels. Databanks dot when human Marines dragged High Admiral Krax before Admiral Sullivan aboard the Vengeance. The alien commander finally understood what his empire had awakened. The human admiral looked at him with the cold fury of someone who had seen too much evil and decided it would stop here. High Admiral Krax, you and your surviving personnel will be tried for war crimes against the Zilani people. Your ships will be destroyed, and your empire will learn that there are consequences for preying on innocent species. Krax's response revealed the depth of his species' arrogance and cruelty. You cannot judge the Vorthak Empire, human. We have conquered dozens of species across hundreds of worlds. You are just one small fleet in a vast galaxy that belongs to us. Admiral Sullivan smiled without warmth as she processed the aliens. Words. Hi, Admiral, you just made a critical error. You told us exactly how large your empire is and how many people you have enslaved. Now we know how much work we have ahead of us. The liberation of the Zilani homeworld took several weeks, as human teams worked to remove every trace of Vorthak occupation. The industrial facilities were dismantled, the prison camps were torn down, and the mass graves were properly marked as memorials to the innocent dead. Keeper Thalen worked closely with Captain Morrison to establish a new government for his people. The Zilani had lost much, but they had also gained something precious, the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe, and that there were other species willing to fight for justice. Captain Morrison, what will happen now? Thalen asked as they stood together looking out over the rebuilding capital city. Will your people stay to protect us from future threats? Morrison placed a gentle hand on the alien's shoulder and smiled. Keeper Thalen, we are going to do something better than that. We are going to make sure threats like the Vorthak Empire cannot hurt anyone ever again. The galaxy is about to change, and it starts here with the friendship between our peoples. As the human fleet prepared to leave the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Sullivan received a priority message from Earth, the news of humanity's first interstellar conflict had reached the home system, and the response was everything she had hoped. For Admiral Sullivan, this is Fleet Command. Well done on your mission. The President has authorized the formation of a permanent galactic patrol force under your command. Show the galaxy what humanity stands for. Admiral Sullivan looked out at the stars and thought about High Admiral Crax's words about the vast Vorthic Empire and all the enslaved species waiting for liberation. She thought about the Zelani children who would grow up free because humans had answered their call for help. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Set course for Earth, we have a galaxy to save.